Hi, my name is Nathan, and I'm speaking for Veridime. Woke. There's a lot to see here because woke has been around for a long time. It's about self-protection because defense is definitely needed. Let's look at what woke is. Where is it from? How did it start? And how has woke become what woke is today? Woke terminology is descendant of African American vernacular about being awake, aware, not asleep, and not oblivious, being the opposite of oblivious. And since its beginning, staying woke refers to watching constantly and carefully against accepting of or apologizing for or even becoming calloused to the relentless onslaught of constant, ubiquitous oppression. Woke has been around a long time. As early as 1923, Jamaican philosopher and activist Marcus Garvey called on Black consciousness to wake up to new, action-oriented social standing. This was before there was even a term for social justice warrior. And by the 1930s, woke became a metaphor for awareness, especially pertaining to political issues and racial justice. For example, musician Leadbelly in 1938 would call to stay woke about threats of racial violence. And during the civil rights movement in the 1960s, woke use described heightened awareness to systemic injustices, an awareness that encompasses all manner of insults and disrespect, recognize barriers and impediments to free exercise of being an actual citizen, no matter how large or how petty. To be aware of the mechanics of being forced into second-class existence, a second-class status cemented into society by habit and tradition, heritage, and directly targeting African Americans. Things like lower wages for equal work, wage theft, stealth segregation through real estate market redlining, being denied real estate loans, or only allowed predatory rates if loans are actually granted. Calls to be woke about systemic oppression have extended into matters on the street, in retail stores, spaces, and outlets, as well as all manner of public buildings, whether municipal, county, state, or federal. Public properties, museums, stadiums, and arenas, public schools, and facilities such as swimming pools, public transportation, and public housing. And so it went on and on. Finally, in 1962, the New York Times ran a story about ascending white appropriation of black slang. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. referenced the woke concept in 1965, saying leaders were, quote, awakening the poor white masses and the former Negro slaves. And the evolution of woke continued through the 70s and 80s to address systemic injustices that needed social attention. Winding forward into the new century, Stay Woke entered general use through popular entertainment. Enter Black Lives Matter, focusing on wide-ranging, multifaceted exposition of social justice issues, including many forms of oppression, like racism, sexism, xenophobia, and homophobia. Woke became the BLM watchword after Michael Brown's death in Ferguson, Missouri. To this day, as it always has, Stay Woke references social justice awareness and social justice activism. Today, there is a disproportionately loud, quite triggered cohort among so-called conservative and specifically the MAGA crowd who have reacted with pronounced resistance and backlash. Detractors use the term as a performative slur, appropriating it in denial of its original meaning and historic use. I call them the diswoke. The damage they sow is diswoke and radical. The denigration they lay down exaggerates and mischaracterizes activism, creating new terms of derision like wokeness and wokeism, as in an excess of being politically correct, as if. And it's been expanded by haters into shorthand dog whistles for leftist political ideology and critical race theory. Never mind that the only courses of critical race theory in the United States have been master's and PhD level studies first offered by schools of law like UCLA, Stanford, and Duke, or war colleges like West Point. Definitely not elementary or even secondary schools. In fact, nobody worldwide, much less the United States, is teaching children critical race theory. Is the ever accelerating pressure for reform in public attitudes and behavior what the detractors and complainers about woke mean by political correctness? Is equality a zero sum game that deprives long entitled elites any of their guaranteed rights? Or does it merely seem to threaten their impunity? Does it only press on their overindulged privilege? What is normal? What is all too ordinary? And what is in need of reform? Who is it really, those calling for equality or those struggling to deny equality, who are actually radical? Woke is about awareness of threats to property, life, and limb, threats to liberty and the pursuit of happiness, to marginalized and minimized citizens, and the actual, measurable, testable, artificial and arbitrary systematic social, ingrained personal, and systemic societal repression on especially one specific minority. And what is at fault here? Complaining about being called out on not noticing as oppression is happening? Is it complaining about having to pay attention to how deeply it runs? Or feeling badly for calloused disregard of its effect? How about taking exception on the need to adjust away from undeserved entitlement because you never had to do that before? Is it wrong to punish the oppressed for drawing your embarrassment out for all to see? Get real. Calling out the bully is not bullying. Calling out racism is not racist. There is no wokeism. Wokeness is not a thing. Wokeism and wokeness only exist as dog whistles. Stories and assertions of woke mind virus nonsense are blatant anti awareness demonstrations of contempt, gratuitous disrespect. Woke mind virus narratives are manufactured smokescreens fabricated to deflect from systematic, layer over layer of habitual and traditional, built in minority oppression at the expense of the many to the benefit of the dwindling few. And this animus is so strong and prevalent that it spills over to affect other minimized groups and marginalized classes. But its origin and obstinate effect endures on the heads of descendants of formerly enslaved people. And everything else that's obtuse or obliquely attributed to being woke, and everything describing wokeness and wokeism are made up, as if being aware of what's coming at you is somehow a bad thing. Again, calling out bullies is not bullying, calling out racism is not racist. Their traditions, habits, and behaviors, euphemistically referred to by the dog whistle heritage, that oblige their targets to vigilance are by any valid, unbiased measure are demonstrably arbitrary designations and are unsupported by anything even remotely resembling reality, manufactured for convenience, demonstrably false when examined under the authority of scientific, economic, and sociological findings, evidence. So, in short, woke is about recognizing the storm clouds approaching. Woke is about being able to tell the difference between real and make believe. I'm Nathan, and I'm speaking for Veridine.